All right. So, well, thank you, Chrissie, for joining us. Before we get started, I just want to let everybody know I am Katie with NAMI Piedmont Tri-County. NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it's the largest grassroots organization in America, advocating, educating, and offering support for those who live with mental illness, their family, their friends, and their loved ones. I personally work in the York County area, but we also cover Lancaster and Chester. And so if you see anything on this webinar that you would like to talk more about, you can just email me at info@nami.org, and I will have that at the end of the webinar as well. So without further ado, Chrissie Hodges, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm super appreciative of you taking time out to come and talk to us. And so just as we get started, I'm going to let you do the talking. So if you would just kind of introduce yourself and let us know about the book and how you got into this and why you're talking to me tonight about OCD.
Yeah, so I'll start, and thank you for having me. It's always a great pleasure to be able to talk about lived experience when it comes to mental illness. I think that that really is a staple in healing and reducing shame and stigma. So I'll talk a little bit about what I do, and then, I can share my story a little bit later. So I'm a certified peer support specialist here in the state of Colorado, and I started doing that work. Let me go back a little bit. So don't want to get into my story just yet, but I guess it was about 10 years ago that I really felt like I had worked through a lot of the emotional stuff that comes along with living with OCD, in particular, what we call pure OCD, which is intrusive thoughts with mental rituals. And I just wanted to give back. I wanted to do something. I didn't want to do therapy because there's ethical issues there about sharing your story. So I fell into peer support. Really, I fell into it. And I found a great job here in Denver where I was working with people and drop-in centers. And then I got to work in the state institution. I was trained and certified and really just got the opportunity to understand what the system is like when it comes to mental illness and work on a multidisciplinary team. And I work directly with a trauma-informed care team. And that was probably the biggest growth of my professional career, to be able to learn what trauma-informed care is. I also simultaneously, while I was, building kind of my knowledge of doing peer support, I was doing advocacy for OCD. Back in those days, there was nothing for the kind of OCD that I live with, which is intrusive thoughts, typically sexual, violent, religious. Intrusive thoughts are basically thoughts that you get that are unwanted. They're very disturbing. They're very scary to the person that is having them. And when you have OCD, to combat that, you do compulsions. So it's the same as your typical OCD that we always talk about, which is contamination. So I have a thought come up and I wash my hands. That's the compulsion. With intrusive thoughts, you have a thought come up and you do a mental ritual, which is ruminating, mental reviewing, avoidance, things along those lines. But they're very invisible to the people around you, and they're also invisible to you. We don't know really what OCD is in the mainstream, except for contamination and organization. When in fact, NOCD has done a study recently that I believe, and I hope that I'm not misquoting, 67% of people who have OCD live with intrusive thoughts and mental rituals. But the average time it takes to get diagnosed and treated is 12 to 15 years. Because the actual experience of living with OCD feels like it's real life. You don't know it's disordered thinking because you are really just experiencing thoughts and doing everything that you can to stop the impact, which is the negative impact it's having on you. So I started doing advocacy about 7 years ago, doing some, I went to Toastmasters, learned how to speak. I did a lot of talks with NAMI here in Denver, and I did the In Your Own Voice, and that was really fun. And then I started doing YouTube videos. And the YouTube videos, that was where it was at. And I really wanted to hone in and focus on the lesser talked about themes of OCD. And that is what I did. And I started to gain a following, meaning not in the social media way, but a following of people who had no idea what was going on. And all of a sudden they're seeing this chick on the screen explaining to them why they're having these horrible thoughts and that there is hope. So you know, I created a community of people who were essentially lost, didn't know what was going on. And the YouTube videos is kind of where everything started for me. So after I did my stint in the Institute, I quit and I actually started a consultation practice where I do referrals to therapists who actually treat OCD with evidence-based treatments, and then peer support for people. And peer support is so important for people who have pure OCD. Remember, pure OCD is just a community name. It's not a diagnosis, but we just use it to distinguish it from physical compulsions to mental. It's so important to have peer support for pure OCD because the themes that you can have can be so terrifying and really make you feel disconnected from who you are. Sexual intrusive thoughts are super common. I might have sexual thoughts about a family member, or I might have sexual thoughts about a kid, or I might have intrusive thoughts about not knowing what my sexual orientation is or my gender, or I might have, you know, sexual thoughts about my animals, or just anything and anyone in general. Harm intrusive thoughts, same thing. I might have harm thoughts about family members, animals, kids. So these are very taboo. That's what we refer to them, because there's not things that you really want to just say to someone. Oh, by the way, I was worried yesterday I was going to pick up a knife and stab you. I mean, that's scary stuff. So taboo, intrusive thought, and sometimes it can involve religion, which is really common. And so when people are having these thoughts, A, they don't want to tell anybody. They're too ashamed. B, they feel so real, because thoughts feel real if you're engaging with them. And what you're doing with OCD is you're trying to argue back, going, this is not true. This is not what I want. And all those are compulsions. It makes it worse. So peer support can really help you know you're not alone. Peer support can't provide therapy, but what it does is when you are so entrenched in this, feeling like a monster, a peer support like myself can go, oh yeah, I've been there too. I've had these thoughts. I've been through it. I got treatment. And you can too. That's what peer support is anyway. So that's what I do. I also wrote a memoir. This kind of kicked everything off, Pure OCD, the invisible side of obsessive-compulsive disorder. And this is just my experience with the onset of OCD up till when I got treatment. And what else do? The government contract I used to work under doing peer support in the institutes, I now own. So my business partner and I are responsible for putting peer support specialists in the state, civilian, and forensic hospitals in Colorado. That's a lot, but oh, and I am the founder and executive director of OCD Game Changers. That's important. That's a wonderful organization I created a few years ago. And we do community events all over the world. We're going to do one in UK and Spain. And we just did a rap cipher in Oklahoma. I mean, we're doing all kinds of cool stuff. It's all about community. It's all about connection, all about making people know you're not alone. There we go.
Oh, yeah, that's a lot. But so I'm going to go back and like kind of pick that apart because I have the luxury of reading your book and I have the luxury of already talking to you because I found you through the peer support section of your website. So it was exciting for me to find a peer support specialist available to do anything, honestly, because, you know, we work a lot with the community who have mental health diagnoses here, and peer support is something that is lacking everywhere. If we could pair people up with a buddy, we would be doing a lot better with a lot of our mental health, but that's a project for another day. So when we're talking about OCD, those thoughts, and I want to kind of differentiate between some of those thoughts and the actual action. So I think it's important for us to, you know, get your take on, you know, I have this intrusive thought that I might do this, but this isn't me thinking, this isn't me saying to myself, I'm going to do this. This is a fear that I think to myself, I'm going to do this. And so I think that that's very important to differentiate. And that's, I think, a lot where people get stuck. It's and why they don't want to talk about it. It's like, no, this is a fear that I might actually think that or do that. This isn't the fact that I want to do that. So, and I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but that can cause a lot of confusion. Tell us what age you were when this started happening to you, when you started recognizing these thoughts, because I think that's important too.
Yeah, and I can share a little bit about my story. First, I just wanted to like go for the jugular here, like just to support what you're saying. One of the biggest fears that I see across the world is intrusive thoughts about pedophilia. So even just saying that word, people that are watching this, you're going to have an inflammatory reaction to that. That word is inflammatory, right? But it is such a common intrusive thought. Why? Because it's so taboo. It's the worst thing that anybody could ever think about. And so if someone has an intrusive, unwanted thought, right, it can be as innocent as, oh my gosh, look how cute that little girl is in the dress. And then your brain goes, oh, you think she's cute? What does that mean? What? And the person with OCD goes, wait a minute, what? No, that's not, no, I mean, I just think she's, wait, what does that mean? Why am I thinking that? No, I don't want, and you all of a sudden go into this spiraling argument about an innocent thought. People with in postpartum, especially male and female, dads and moms, after they have a kid, this is super common. I'm changing the diaper of my baby, and I'm, oh my gosh, I just, you know, am I wiping correctly? Am I doing something wrong? Did I just molest my child? You know, you get an intrusive, unwanted thoughts. This is not desires. This is not a, you know, oh, I want this and I'm just being secretive. It is this, I'm terrified, to the point where people then stop interacting with their kids and are too scared to tell someone that this is going on. They're too scared to Google. They're too scared to go to tell friends, because what if people don't understand? So it's important to make that, exactly like you're saying, it's important to make the distinction, and also to know that help is available, and that these taboo intrusive thoughts are really common. Even though you are going to think that you're alone, you're not. And that there is help. So I'll go into my story. I'll do a fast forward because, you know, since you read the book, you know, it's long. I developed OCD when I was 8. That was the onset of OCD, even though even before that, I could remember having intrusive thoughts about things like people breaking into the house. I would check locks, kind of more your physical compulsions. And then when I was 8 years old, I developed a fear of vomit, which is also really common. We call it emetophobia. And this happened, I was sitting in the classroom, a kid threw up. It had happened before, I don't know how many times, or I'd thrown up, no big deal. But this particular day, I had a massive panic attack in response to that. And my brain, it was almost like someone switched a light. I went into, you know, a normal everyday kid playing Atari and doing all kid things, to trying to figure out why I'm having a physical response, which was anxiety, but I didn't know that as an 8-year-old. And I was consumed with thoughts about, am I going to get sick? And, you know, did I get too close to that person? Well, and then this was the kicker. My 8-year-old brain, because I grew up in a very religious household, my dad's a minister in the South. My 8-year-old brain was trying to grasp onto any reasoning, and my brain went to, I must have done something wrong and God's punishing me. So this is called religious scrupulosity when we're talking about OCD. So then all of a sudden I'm going, I did something wrong. What if my dad finds out? What if everybody finds out? I have to start repenting. So my compulsions started to become prayer, doing everything I could to be a good person, making sure I wasn't sinning, all of these things. And then I did not tell anybody. I mean, I was like, first of all, I knew that no one would believe me. I mean, maybe they would have, but I just, even at 8 years old, I knew that it would be kind of, I would be looked at as wonky or just kind of brushed off. So I just didn't say anything. And so I proceeded to suffer by myself for the next however many years. And also believing that this was something I was being punished for by God. Now, it seems delusional. Okay, like, so you may be going, well, that seems like psychosis. It's not, though, because I had insight. I remember thinking, this is stupid. Like, I know that even as like 8 years old, I was like, I know that this isn't what's happening, but you can't resist when it feels so real. So I started engaging in compulsions every day. Again, I went from a normal kid to having to do all these mental rituals all day, every day. And then when I was a teenager, I had lots of weird intrusive thoughts that came in. I had one of harming kids. I was in the car with a couple kids one time, and one of the kids threw another stuffed animal at the other kid, and her face looked kind of funny before she started crying. I mean, you know, it just happens. And I laughed. And then she started crying, and I was like, oh my God, you just laughed at a kid because she's in pain. And I jumped out of the car. I mean, it wasn't moving, and I went running like across the field. And I was like, why are you laughing at a kid that's in pain? Does this mean you want to hurt kids? And the whole way, we were coming back from Florida, and the whole way back, I was white knuckling in the car, like not wanting to interact with the kids. Cause what if I lost control and I hurt a kid? Do I want to hurt a kid? And I was just for 8 hours ruminating about whether I could hurt a kid. Luckily, you know, I got out of the car and it kind of went away. Then I had one about demon possession. I had intrusive thoughts about my family. And then when I was 14, the big one hit. I was pretty boy crazy when I was a teenager, and I was still dealing with religious scrupulosity, which meant I could not sin or God would put bad thoughts in my head. I know it sounds weird, but that's kind of how I kept it all together. And one night I was at one of my friends' houses, and the topic of sex came up, and I was like, Chrissie, you can't talk about sex. This is a sin. And I remember specifically being like, how do I change the topic? So I like tried to talk about like, I don't know, ice cream or softball or something, like whatever had happened that day. Like, oh, what about that football game? But we kept talking about it, and I was like, okay, fine. And then later that night, I started thinking about sex as a 14-year-old. And then I started thinking, why is it that everybody else could just have sex or do whatever they want and I can't? And so I'm starting to get angry, and I'm starting to have some insight a little. And then boom, my brain went, well, maybe it's because you're gay. And I was like, what am I? Like, am I gay? No, I'm not gay. And back in the day, this was in the 90s, y'all, in the South. So yes, people did think it was wrong to be gay, but I had no issue with being gay. If I was gay, I would have been gay, and I would have probably been loud and proud about it based on like my track record of being loud and proud about everything. But I just knew I wasn't, but my brain was like, but then, you know, why this or why? And all of a sudden, again, it was like that light switch went off, and I was like, I guess the best way to describe it is my brain went, well, if there isn't some truth to it, then why are you having the thoughts? And there was no answer to that question, right? I don't know why I'm having why do I worry about throwing up all the time? I don't know. It's just there. So there was a fleeting moment where I went, this feels just like the fear of vomit. Like, I mean, and I thought, it's almost like I had this weird moment of clarity, and I was like, I wonder if the two are related. But then the intrusive thoughts hit again, and it was all over. Then it was just compulsion after compulsion after compulsion. So again, I didn't tell anybody. I suffered like this for another 6 years. So in total, I went 12 years with intrusive thoughts about throwing up, about sexual orientation and religious scrupulosity, with a lot of other crap mixed in, like, you know, sexual intrusive thoughts about everything you can possibly think of. And then when I was 20, and in my brain, I always thought, if I'm ever forced to tell anyone, I'll just kill myself. Now, understand, I'm not saying like, if I was gay, I would kill myself. That is not what I'm saying. So I hope everyone can understand the distinction. What I'm saying is, I was so scared of what was going on internally. And the overarching theme was, you're a bad person and God's punishing you with bad thoughts and feelings, anxiety. So my brain said, if I ever have to tell anyone, I would be too ashamed, because my dad would find out that God's punishing me, and he's a minister. And so I thought, if it ever gets to that point, I will kill myself. And so I fell into a very deep depression when I was 20, because you really can only hold up OCD for so long. It's exhausting. And I'd thought about suicide before, and I'd been depressed before, but I would count days on when am I going to get out of this? And when is this going to break? And then when I was 20, it just fell too deep into a depression, and I attempted suicide. And luckily I survived and was hospitalized. This was in 1998. And I articulated my symptoms so clearly that the therapist came back and said, I think this is OCD. I've never seen anything like this, but I didn't believe him at first, but then I had some sort of hope. Okay, maybe this isn't God punishing me. Maybe this is something that can be helped. And medication helped a lot the first year. Then I was like, oh, I don't have it anymore. I know what it is. I can control it. Boom, relapse. And then that's when I, on AOL dial-up, found Dr. Stephen Phillipson in New York, who is willing to do phone therapy with me, exposure response prevention. And I learned how to manage OCD from that point on.
So I know that's a lot for everybody, and I've read the book, so I have that background, but I think that what I really wanted to get across to people with this is that there's a lot of people in my community that have children who have this intrusive thinking, have these OCD thoughts, have this OCD. I live in a world where PANS and PANDAS is part of, the diagnoses that a lot of our kids get. And that always comes with OCD. And so that's kind of their first inclination that something's going wrong. And a lot of our kids, we recognize that religious scrupulosity. But I feel like we're probably missing a lot of the picture, because it can't just be one form of OCD. And so they may have the external compulsions, the hoarding and the organizing and those things. But I think that we may be missing some of the other pieces, because our children genuinely can't tell us what's going on. They don't want to, they're ashamed and embarrassed. And I think this is me just thinking, in my own little world, that it's important for us to talk about this, even though it can be startling and people can be kind of, you say pedophilia, you say sexual intrusive thoughts, you say these things, and people kind of go, oh no, but I think it's really important to understand that it's not the want to do the act, it's the fear of the want to do the act. And I can't stress that enough. It's a fear about that, not an actual desire to do that. And I think that if we could get across to people that that's kind of what's going on, then it would be easier to talk about. It would be easier to kind of address these conversations. So I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming and being so open and honest, and people hearing this conversation, because I think it's life-saving for these kids, because like you, when they hold it in for so long, they exhaust themselves. And I remember saying to you, I am shocked that people live through this. I'm shocked that at 12 and 15 years of trying to manage this themselves, and after reading everything that you had written and looking at this more, I'm shocked that people don't end their lives from this. And so I have to guess that people do. I have to guess that people.
Oh, yes. I think if we knew the amount of people that lose their lives to this, but here's the thing: if I had succeeded in suicide, no one would have known.
Right.
No one. I was picture perfect on the outside, just straight A student, athlete, popular in my class. And a lot of people I meet with people all over the world. They're successful, they're funny, they have brilliant social lives, and not everybody, but I'm just saying, like, it's masked a lot. And a lot of times people create those lives to mask it.
Right.
Because they're so broken and terrified about what's going on. I guess what I want to really emphasize is, you may think to yourself, well, if I had those weird thoughts, I would just know. And I would just ask, no, you would not. No, you would not. When you go outside and it's cold, you're cold. So you believe it's cold, right? So are you going to go and tell someone, is it cold, or ask, is it cold outside? You're not going to. So if you wake up and you have intrusive thoughts about why your stomach is hurting, and maybe you had watched something on 2020 2 weeks ago that talked about stomach cancer, all of a sudden you're convinced you have stomach cancer. No one can tell you that you don't. And that's OCD. So you cannot distinguish because it feels so real. And
Right.
So it's important for people to understand, especially if you're supporting a loved one, you cannot reassure someone out of this. You cannot. In fact, reassurance is a compulsion, and it makes things worse. If I go to my family and say, I'm having intrusive thoughts that I'm going to hurt you, they're going to go, oh, you know, you don't, they would, but they might go, oh, you won't, you're not violent. Well,
Right.
that in my brain is going to go, yeah, but you really don't know, like these thoughts are there and I'm so scared. And I think that I should stay at a hotel because what if I snapped, and what if I did something, and I'm so scared and I love you. And you know, so it almost it sounds like I'm stupid, like that.
Right.
I can't trust my own thoughts. And that's what a lot of us feel like. How am I so stupid that I can't trust my own thoughts? You know,
Right.
and I can't trust, you know, and this is just part of the whole journey that is OCD, that unfortunately in the media gets this, you know, clicky little funny, like glitchy, whatever I'm trying to say, cliche.
No, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so OCD, you know, stop it.
Right, because it's not, you know, and I have heard that over and over again from, especially, we talk a lot in high schools, you know about NAMI, we do a lot of presentations in high school, and that's probably one of the first things that kids will say when I start talking about anorexia and bulimia and things like that, the compulsive behaviors in that realm. They'll say, you know, I hate when people make jokes about that. I hate when people say, oh, I'm so OCD because I like my desk neat, and they say they have no idea how distressing it is for me to have these kind of thoughts. And so some of our kids are aware of what they're doing, but again, I truly believe they're open to talking about the obvious ones that aren't taboo. But I think that it seems there are just, I've spent a lot of time reading about OCD and reading books, and there's a lot of intrusive thinking about things like HIV and about blood disorders and about the sexual thoughts and those kind of things. And I think that that's never going to be something that our kids are going to talk about. It's never going to be something that adults are going to freely talk about. And so I think that, again, this conversation is so important. So tell us this. So you did go from having that suicide attempt and thankfully recovering from that. But what really put you into, you said that you went into, you had it under control with medication, and then you decided that it was over, and so you stopped. So what did you do to get kind of into that period of recovery, and why did you decide to bail on that? Because I know that a lot of people in my world will be stable and will be doing well, and then they stop their medications. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, so I was put on an SSRI and it worked wonderfully. It doesn't always work for people, but there is, I guess, to a degree, I don't know if this is unique to OCD or if this is just across the board, but I guess I can talk freely in my own experience. There's just some feeling inside of myself that really just wants to believe that I can control my own brain. And I see that in a lot of people with OCD, because the part of the brain that's impacted by OCD is the amygdala, which is a reptilian part of the brain. It's completely communicated with through behavior. And so as someone being a human being, I make decisions on logic. So if I'm sitting here going, I know I have OCD, I don't need medication, I don't need this, I'm using logic to try to outsmart a brain disorder that doesn't care about logic.
Right.
And so people go through, you know, I see this a lot, is that's how relapse happens. That's how people get stuck in relapse is, well, now I know what it is, so now I should be able to control it. It doesn't work that way, because you're still using logic, and the amygdala doesn't care about logic. It only cares about behavior. Behavior meaning compulsions.
Right.
And again, I'm going to go right back and emphasize, it feels so real that you cannot outthink it. Because if I could, And this is why reassurance doesn't work. I mean, if, you know, I had I mean, I'll just put it out there today. I was worried today that I had a help disorder, and I went and Googled for an hour. I knew I was doing it, but I was like, whatever, I'm just going to look. And by the time I got done, I was so wrapped up in the fact that I really had this, that at one point I was like, oh my gosh, I feel dizzy. That means that it's really true, because I had just read all the symptoms, and now my brain, my logical brain, is manifesting the symptoms. So it feels so real. You cannot escape it. So that's exactly what happened to me. And it's exactly what happens to a lot of people. You get the diagnosis and you think, great, now I can outthink it. And you just underestimate the lines of communication that cannot connect with the amygdala and like the frontal lobe. So I went on medication. It was wonderful, but the side effects of SSRIs, you know, sexual side effects. I was in college, for God's sake. I wanted to have fun, and, you know, I had a boyfriend and I was in love and all that. And I was like, oh, well, this sucks, because nothing can happen when you're on SSRIs. Well, at least it couldn't for me. And, you know, there were other things. And also it just was, life just got in the way. And so I just thought, I don't need this. I'll be able to outthink this. And then within 6 weeks, I was suicidal again. And the funny thing is, I was suicidal. It's not funny. I was suicidal, but I didn't make the connection. Oh, I got off my meds again because it felt so real. I was like, uh-oh, these thoughts are back. That means I don't have OCD. This is real. It took my roommate going, didn't you stop taking Prozac? And I was like, oh, but I still didn't believe it because the thoughts felt so real. I was like, it can't be the medication. Luckily, I found Phillipson. And within several months, I learned how, I like to put it this way so people understand, I'd learned how to effectively communicate with my amygdala instead of trying to argue with logic and it arguing back with behavior and us missing signals. He taught me how to effectively communicate with it so I could learn to manage when these thoughts came up.
So now that's a really interesting question. So what does that look like? So say you have that, just because I know the vomiting one is a very common one as well. So say the vomiting thought, and I don't want to put thoughts in your head, but you know, say it comes up for you.
Anyway.
So say it comes up for you. How do you effectively shut that down now? How would you achieve that this time that you couldn't achieve before? What does that look like now?
I'm like, I've thought I was going to vomit 6 times today, so don't you worry. You know,
I have one that has a terrible fear of vomiting, so I'm interested because I mean, it is a, you know, it keeps us awake at night. But yeah, so I mean, I'm really interested in kind of, and I, you know, I understand that this needs to be done through professionals and it takes a long time, or it can take a long time, and you know, it's something that needs to be done. But how does that look for you now rather than it did like 10 years ago?
So that would be 22 years ago, by the way.
Okay, I was giving you some grace there. But
but I just, for a minute, I was like 10 years ago. I am actually a lot older. So this is the best way that I can put it without giving any examples that might make people want to do this on their own, because they
yes.
So what exposure response prevention is the evidence-based treatment for OCD. It is challenging, and I would not suggest Googling it if you're going to go through it. Just don't just experience it for what it is when you are ready and motivated to get better. What Phillipson, Dr. Stephen Phillipson taught me was how to effectively have a conversation with my amygdala, right? By using the language of behavior. So what that is instead of arguing back. So if the amygdala is part of our, you know, if someone was breaking into your house, frontal lobe shuts down, amygdala lights up, fight, flight, or freeze. You know, you're not going to sit on the bed and go, what am I going to do? Am I going to go hide? Am I going to, you just act, you don't think. This is the part of the brain that's lighting up when you have OCD. So at that point, you're in fight, flight, or freeze. And then compulsions come in because it's not an actual threat, but it's a glitch. I call it the glitch, you know.
Right.
So then you start doing compulsions to try to argue back. You know, no, I don't want to have sex with my dad. No, I don't want to kill my animal, right? Because you're sitting here going, that's not true, but why am I having? So what you do is when you do a compulsion, you're arguing back, which makes the amygdala angrier and it yells louder. I mean, this is all elementary, by the way.
Right. Yes.
Not what peer-reviewed research would say. This is just me breaking it down for everyone to understand. So now you're in an argument with a part of the brain and you're speaking a different language.
Right.
So who's going to yell louder? The amygdala, because its job is to keep you alive. The amygdala will literally argue to the death. So ERP, this is a great example. If you're on Facebook or if you're on social media, have you ever been in an argument on social media and there's something in your brain where you just want to have the last word, but that troll keeps coming back? And then it bothers you and you're sitting there, but I want to have the last comment. I want to have it. Why? You don't know this person and they're going to keep coming back because this is what it's like to argue with the amygdala.
Oh, that's fantastic. Fantastic.
Yeah. So ERP is just don't comment and who cares? Don't comment back. Let the troll win. And you know how hard that is because you're like,
gosh,
but I just want to tell it. No, because it doesn't matter because you're not going to win. You'll never win with the amygdala. So ERP teaches you to kind of replicate a situation that would be triggering, and you go through the motions of it and show the amygdala, do your thing, and I'm not going to argue back. Meaning, I'm not going to do compulsions. If you practice that daily, I mean, you have to practice it over and over and over and over and over. You start to recognize the pattern of OCD, and then you can effectively resist engaging in the argument with the amygdala.
That makes a lot of sense. It also now makes a lot of sense to me. And I couldn't really figure out why childhood trauma led to OCD, or why there is a link between childhood trauma and OCD. I know there is a link. I just couldn't see why there was a link. And so now that I know the amygdala is involved in that, and I know that, from all the trauma-informed care that we've been taught, now I understand that the same parts of the brain are involved and the same rewiring needs to happen so that makes a lot of sense, actually. And I think anybody watching this is probably very trauma-informed. I think a lot of people in our world have become trauma-informed, but there's bits that we're still not, we still don't know enough about. So I know that you have an appointment in about 20 minutes. So if anybody has any questions, they're welcome to go ahead and put that in the chat box, and I will be sure to ask Chrissie about the questions. But the other thing that I wanted to ask you about is why is this so missed? Why is it not just, when you go to a therapist, it can take years and years and years before they even recognize? Is it because they don't know enough about pure OCD or about OCD, or is it because because that it's not as well known as people would hope it would be? Is that what you think that the?
I mean, it's a combination of. I mean, it just certainly is not taught in master's in psychology programs.
Okay.
It really is just this. Whenever you hear about OCD, and I think that unfortunately the media perpetuates this as well. We're always talking about organization. People just get away with. When I'm listening to the news and you'll have a newscaster go, "Oh yeah, I'm so OCD about this," and I'm like, y'all, somebody needs to correct this. Like, we're making fun of a mental health disorder. Stop it. And so I think in movies and things like that, people aren't. They'll do movies with people that have OCD or whatever. They're not consulting with people that are specialized. And because therapists aren't taught how to effectively treat OCD, they're just taught, oh, whatever this, just throw some CBT at it. Then you really just have to rely on the people. I'll just be honest, like when it comes to this taboo stuff, you have to rely on people that just have the balls to talk about it out loud. I mean, it's like, certainly if you're going to talk openly about pedophilia theme, sexual orientation, things like that, people now won't talk about that thing because they're worried about cancel culture, right?
Right.
Because people aren't going to understand it. And so they're going to think that people are saying they're afraid they're gay. That's not what it is, right?
Right.
It's intrusive thoughts. But then we're talking about, themes, these themes that people don't understand. A lot of people won't talk about it because they're worried it will impact their brand. It's sad, but that's just kind of the way it is. And
Yeah,
when you've struggled through it the way that I have, especially some of those deeper taboo intrusive thoughts, I'm not talking about sexual orientation or vomit. I'm talking about like the religious stuff. And I've had POCD, which is pedophilia theme. I've had incest OCD, which is I'm scared I'm going to have sexual intrusive thoughts about family. Like when you've had that stuff and you come out the other side, something in you shifts and goes, I don't want anyone else to suffer this way. And to me, I just threw it all caution to the wind. I don't care what people have to say about it. I don't care if they call me, whatever name they're going to on the YouTube channel. It doesn't matter, because the only people that matter are the ones that are out there right now, not knowing, that might be contemplating suicide. We have to get to them. We have to say there's hope. We have to let them know that it's not real. I mean, it is real, but the thoughts aren't real, and there's hope.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this, because I want people to understand that, suffering with this in silence is not going to be helpful to anybody. We have to bring the conversation and elevate the conversation, because if we don't, then we're missing a lot of the pieces of the puzzle. And that's the lifelong distress that I see in a lot of the adult OCD groups. How can I live with this one more day? And I see that posted on the groups. I see a lot of suicidal ideation posted on those groups. And I want better for people. I want more for people. I want people to understand that this is something that also can be recovered from. This isn't who you are. This is an intrusive thinking process. So,
and the people that have these really dark thoughts, people imagine that they're probably these really weird, creepy people,
right.
And like I'll do groups and people come onto the groups and they're all like not turning their camera on because they want to see who's there. They want to see if it's a bunch of monsters. And then they're like, oh my God, you're everyday people with everyday careers, successful people with families, with lives. If you're watching this, people that have intrusive thoughts. You just don't know it because they would never tell you. Right. And they're like, their lives look just like yours, but they're debilitated, like suffering inside.
See, and I think that's the interesting thing about mental illness, right? It is invisible. All mental illness for the most part is people hide it very well. When they're in kindergarten, middle school, maybe not so much, but as they get into high school and above, college, and people have an ability to put a different face on it. And they learn to hide these things, they learn to mask it. And that's when, we really do start losing people. So very quickly, because I know, again, you've got to get going, but tell people about your peer support and about how they can reach out to you, how they can find you, how they can get information on what it is that you do and other people. Well, there really isn't anybody else like you, I don't think. I think there's you and your business partner, and I didn't find anybody else that was doing what you do. So tell people how they can actually get a hold of you.
Yeah, so if you want to order my book, if you want to learn really the inside scoop on what it's like to have OCD, I wrote this from a very emotional perspective, from the inside look on what it's like to have this. You can go on Amazon. Again, it's called Pure OCD, the invisible side of obsessive-compulsive disorder. My website's ChrissieHodges.com. I do peer support, but I also, a trained peer supporter works with any disorder or diagnosis. So if you just need support in general, I can work with you. I just typically work with people with OCD. Head on over to YouTube if you want to find out more about any possible taboo theme, the shame around it, all that. I'm at Chrissie Hodges on YouTube. And you'll get a lot of insight into the actual experience of OCD. And then if you want to learn more about my nonprofit, go to OCDGameChangers.com.
And what's the OCD Game Changers again, real quick?
So that's my nonprofit. And what we do is we actually support and uplift advocates doing the work, because we believe the more people that are doing things, the more like more people we're going to save. So we're really appreciative and want to support advocates all over the world. And then we also do small community events. So we just did a rap cipher in Oklahoma, which was so cool.
What is a rap cipher?
It's like a rap battle, but
Oh,
they didn't really battle. Thank goodness. I was like, I wouldn't have known what was going to happen if it was a battle. But they were rapping about their mental health experience.
oh, wow.
I cried through the whole thing. I mean, it was unbelievable. And then we have an event in the UK and Spain in October. And then our next event in 2023 is in Georgia. So we do events everywhere, bringing people together, sharing lived experience, creating connections, and having people really see other people and know, okay, I have these awful thoughts, but so do these people. And we all seem pretty normal.
Right.
Like that's the whole point of our event. So it's a pretty cool organization. We have a lot of really cool stuff coming up. So head on over. And if you want to donate, we're a 501c3.
Awesome. Well, with that, I'm going to let you go because you've got 10 minutes left before you need to be on your next appointment. So thank you so much, Chrissie. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you coming and just breaking that stigma. And, we always say at NAMI, you're not alone, and ending the silence, ending the stigma around mental health. And I think that you're really busting that down, and we can only appreciate people like you because it makes it easier for everybody coming along, and so we appreciate it. So thank you so much. And if you do need to get in touch with Chrissie, you've got her information. If you need to get in touch with NAMI for for support groups or for education and advocacy, you can get in touch with us at namipiedmont.org or at info@namipiedmont.org. So thank you so much, everybody. Take care.